Commander Zex'hai clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among his species as he watched the human crew member, Sarah Chen, carry a small furry creature in her arms. The other members of the Stellar Harmony's bridge crew, a mix of Kethmori, Vel'Turun, and SCIFI, turned their various sensory organs toward the peculiar sight. Human Sarah, Zex'hai's translator rendered his chittering speech into standard. "What is that diminutive creature you carry?" Sarah looked up from scratching behind the small black cat's ears, her face brightening with the expression humans called a smile. "This is Pixel. She's my cat." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle humming of the ship's engines. Then, like a dam bursting, laughter erupted from every non-human throat, or the equivalent thereof. Navigation Officer Krextel, a towering Kethmori whose people were renowned across the galaxy as fearsome warriors, bent his massive frame nearly in half as he wheezed with mirth. That is your companion creature? Your bond beast for protection and hunting." "She's not exactly for protection," Sarah said, her cheeks reddening slightly. "She's more of a friend." This only made the laughter worse. Security Chief Vel'mora, whose own bond creature was a saber-toothed Vel'Turun ripper that stood 4 feet at the shoulder, shook her elongated head in disbelief. "Human, I have seen your species' legendary bond with creatures. The stories speak of great wolves, of massive bears, of hunting cats the size of shuttlecraft. And you choose this." Pixel, seeming entirely unbothered by the attention, began to purr, a sound so soft it was barely audible over the ship's ambient noise. The alien crew members leaned closer, their laughter dying into confused murmurs. "What is that vibration?" asked Dr. Shisera, the ship's SCIFI medical officer, her serpentine head tilting with scientific curiosity. "She's purring," Sarah explained. "It means she's happy." Engineer Thokgrim, built like a living boulder with arms, rumbled what might have been a chuckle. "A creature that announces its emotional state to potential predators? How did such a species survive to domestication?" "Actually," Sarah said, settling into her communications station with Pixel curled in her lap, "cats are incredibly efficient predators. On Earth, they've been hunting for millions of years. They're silent, patient, and deadly when they need to be." This brought another round of good-natured scoffing from the bridge crew. Commander Zex'hai gestured with one of his 4 arms at Pixel, who had begun grooming herself with delicate pink tongue strokes. "Deadly," he repeated, his translator managing to convey his skepticism. "Human Sarah, I mean no disrespect, but that creature appears to mass perhaps 4 of your kilograms. The smallest hunting beast in my homeworld's wilderness masses 50 kilograms and can tear through combat armor." "Pixel's not about size," Sarah protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Looking around at the bridge crew, each member representing species that had evolved alongside massive, terrifying predators, she suddenly felt very small and very human. She's about precision." "Precision," Navigation Officer Krextel repeated thoughtfully. His people, the Kethmori, revered precision in all things. It was what made them such excellent warriors and strategists. "Interesting. And what prey does this Pixel hunt with such legendary precision?" Sarah's cheeks grew redder. "Well, mostly toy mice, sometimes string. There was this one spider in my quarters that she stalked for 3 days before." The bridge erupted in laughter again, though not unkindly. These beings had served alongside humans for months now and had grown fond of their strange, emotional, pack-bonding species. But the idea of a 4-kilogram hunting companion was simply too absurd. "Perhaps," Commander Zex'hai said once the laughter died down, "your Pixel could protect us from hostile threads and dangerous toy mice." Even Sarah laughed at that, scratching Pixel behind the ears as the little cat settled in for a nap. "Yeah, maybe she could." But as the Stellar Harmony continued its journey toward the Outer Rim trading stations, none of them, not even Sarah, truly understood what they were carrying in their midst. They saw a small, soft creature that spent most of its time sleeping and playing. They didn't see the descendant of millions of years of apex predator evolution, compressed into a deceptively small package. They would learn soon enough. As the shift progressed, the crew fell into their familiar routines. Sarah monitored long-range communications, Pixel dozed in the warm spot created by the console's heat, and the rest of the bridge crew went about their duties with the casual efficiency of a team that had been working together for over a standard year. Entering the Kepler Belt asteroid field, announced Navigation Officer Krextel. Reducing to sublight speed. Estimated time to outpost Gamma, 14 standard hours. Commander Zex'hai nodded, his compound eyes reflecting the starfield displayed on the main view screen. The Kepler Belt was a notorious smuggler's haven, filled with hollowed-out asteroids that served as hidden bases, fuel depots, and worse, it was also their fastest route to the outer rim. Maintain standard alert status, he ordered. Engineering, prepare for potential course corrections. Dr. Sarah, please ensure Medical Bay is prepared for possible casualties. It was routine caution, the kind of preparation that had kept the Stellar Harmony and its crew safe through dozens of dangerous passages. None of them suspected that their greatest threat wouldn't come from pirates or asteroid collisions. It would come from something much smaller, much more patient, and already aboard their ship. The first sign of trouble came during the night shift, ship's time. Sarah was asleep in her quarters, Pixel curled up in her customary spot at the foot of the bed, when the ship's internal sensors detected something unusual. In the cargo bay, a section of the outer hull that had been weakened by micrometeorite impacts over the past year finally gave way, not to the vacuum of space, but to something that had been waiting, attached to their hull like a microscopic parasite for exactly this opportunity. The creature that squeezed through the gap was barely visible even on the ship's most sensitive scanners. No larger than Sarah's thumb, it moved with purpose through the cargo bay's ventilation system. Its species had a name in the ancient tongue of the void hunters who had created them, Vex'hai, meaning silent death, but most civilized species simply called them sleepers. The sleeper was a product of biological warfare from a war fought millennia ago between species whose names were lost to time. Engineered to be the perfect infiltrator, it could survive in vacuum for decades, subsist on minimal resources, and above all, it could wait. Some sleepers had been found dormant on derelict ships centuries after their initial infestation. Still viable, still deadly. But their most terrifying attribute was their hunting method. Sleepers didn't attack directly, they were far too small for that. Instead, they secreted a toxin into a ship's atmosphere, a molecule so carefully crafted that it bypassed most species' natural defenses and accumulated in neural tissue over the course of hours. The toxin was undetectable by standard sensors and caused no immediate symptoms. The victims simply went to sleep and never woke up. By morning, the sleeper had traveled through most of the ship's ventilation system, leaving microscopic traces of its toxin in the air recycling systems. When the day shift began, every breath drawn by the crew contained molecules of death. Sarah arrived on the bridge feeling refreshed, Pixel riding on her shoulder in what had become their morning routine. She didn't notice that several of her crewmates seemed slightly more sluggish than usual, or that Dr. Sarah had reported an unusual number of crew members complaining of minor fatigue. "Good morning, human Sarah," Commander Zex'hai greeted her, though his usually sharp mandible clicks seemed somewhat muted. "I trust you and your precision predator slept well?" Sarah smiled, settling Pixel onto her lap as she took her station. "Like babies. How's our progress through the asteroid field?" "Excellent," Navigation Officer Krextel reported, though he had to suppress what appeared to be a yawn, unusual for a Kethmori, whose species rarely showed fatigue during their active cycle. "We should reach Outpost Gamma within 6 hours." The shift progressed normally, with only minor course corrections needed to navigate around the larger asteroids. But as the hours passed, the crew's efficiency began to decline in subtle ways. Response times lengthened by fractions of seconds. Conversations became slightly less animated. Several crew members reported to Dr. Sarah with complaints of drowsiness. "Probably just the asteroid field's gravitational interference affecting our circadian rhythms," the doctor had theorized, not knowing that she herself was already showing early symptoms of toxin exposure. "I recommend extra rest for anyone feeling unusually tired." By the 4th hour, Commander Zex'hai had to consciously fight to keep his eyes open. Security Chief Vel'mora's usually perfect posture had developed a slight slouch. Even the massive engineer Thokgrim, whose species was legendary for their endurance, found himself struggling to concentrate on routine maintenance reports. Only two beings on the ship remained unaffected: Sarah and Pixel. Sarah, because human biochemistry was different enough from the sleeper's target profiles that the toxin worked much more slowly on her species. She felt tired, certainly, but attributed it to the long shift and the stress of navigating the asteroid field. And Pixel was something the sleeper's ancient creators had never encountered. Cats had evolved on Earth to be incredibly sensitive to environmental toxins. Their livers processed dangerous substances differently than most mammals, making them both more vulnerable to some poisons and mysteriously resistant to others. But more importantly, cats had evolved as predators of small, quick creatures that often tried to hide in dark spaces, like creatures the size of a human thumb moving through ventilation systems. Pixel had been aware of the sleeper since its first movement through the ship's hull. Her pupils had dilated slightly, her ears had turned to track sounds too faint for human hearing, and her hunting instincts, refined by millions of years of evolution, had locked onto the intruder. Sarah noticed none of this. She was too focused on her console and too affected by the gradually increasing toxin levels to pay attention to the subtle changes in her cat's behavior. Pixel's pupils were fully dilated now, her body held in the absolute stillness that preceded a hunt. Every sense focused on the tiny creature moving through the ship's ventilation system above their heads. "Commander," Sarah said, fighting off a wave of drowsiness. "I'm picking up some unusual readings from the atmospheric sensors. There seems to be a trace organic compound that—" Her words were cut off as Commander Zex'hai's head drooped forward, his breathing becoming deep and regular. Around the bridge, the other crew members were succumbing one by one to the sleeper's toxin. Security Chief Vel'mora's head lolled back in her chair, her breathing shallow but steady. Navigation Officer Krextel's massive hands had gone limp on his controls. "Commander!" Sarah stood up, panic beginning to cut through the toxin's effects on her system. "Vel'mora? Krextel?" No response. The bridge had become silent except for the gentle sounds of deep, drugged sleep and the ship's ambient noise. And one other sound, so soft Sarah almost missed it. The ventilation grate directly above her station had begun to vibrate almost imperceptibly. Pixel heard it too. The little cat's head turned upward, her body coiling with tension, every muscle prepared for action. Her hunting instincts, honed by countless generations of predators, had identified the threat that all the ship's sensors had missed. Something was in the ceiling, something small, patient, and deadly. Something that was about to make the mistake of underestimating a 4-kilogram precision predator. The sleeper had fed well. Its toxin had worked exactly as designed, flooding the ship's atmosphere and sending every conscious being into deep, unnatural sleep. All that remained was the final phase of its life cycle, to find a suitable host for reproduction before moving on to infest another vessel. It preferred large hosts with substantial neural tissue, and the bridge crew offered several excellent options. The commander with his complex compound nervous system would serve perfectly. The sleeper began its descent through the ventilation system, following chemical traces toward its chosen victim. What it didn't expect was to encounter resistance. Sarah fought against the increasing drowsiness with everything she had, but human physiology wasn't immune to the toxin, just slower to succumb. Her vision was beginning to blur, and her movements felt sluggish and uncoordinated. She managed to activate a general alarm before her fingers became too numb to work the controls properly. "Emergency! Emergency on bridge!" she mumbled into her communicator, not sure if anyone could hear or respond. "Crew, unconscious, possible contamination." But even as she spoke, she could feel herself losing the battle. Her eyelids felt like they weighed kilograms, and the chair beneath her seemed to be pulling her down into its embrace. She would be unconscious within minutes, leaving the ship drifting helplessly through the asteroid field. Then she noticed Pixel. The small cat had moved from Sarah's lap to the floor directly beneath the ventilation grate. Her posture was unlike anything Sarah had seen before. Every muscle tensed, pupils dilated to black pools, ears swiveled forward with laser focus. Pixel's tail was low and still, her breathing shallow and controlled. She was hunting. Pixel, Sarah whispered, forcing the words through increasingly numb lips. What do you? The ventilation grate shifted slightly, just a fraction of a centimeter. But enough. Pixel's head tilted with predatory precision, tracking movement too small for human senses to detect. Inside the ventilation system, the sleeper paused. Its simple nervous system registered something unusual, vibrations in the ship structure that didn't match the normal patterns of artificial gravity and life support. Something was moving below it, something that radiated the focused attention of a predator. But that was impossible. The toxin had been dispersed throughout the ship for hours now. Every oxygen-breathing creature should be unconscious or dying. The sleeper's creators had designed it to work against every known spacefaring species. They had never encountered a cat. Pixel's hunting instincts, refined through millions of years of evolution, were operating on a level that transcended conscious thought. She could smell the alien scent, could hear the microscopic scratching of chitin against metal, could sense the electromagnetic field generated by the creature's nervous system. Every sense was locked onto her prey with the absolute focus that had made Earth's cats the most successful predators on their planet. The sleeper began to move again, seeking the opening that would allow it to drop down onto its chosen host. It squeezed through a gap in the ventilation grate, extending its sensory organs to locate the best point of attack. It made it exactly 2 centimeters into the open air before Pixel struck. The little cat's leap was a masterpiece of predatory engineering. 4 kilograms of muscle, claw, and fang launching upward with perfect timing and trajectory. Her paws hit the sleeper with surgical precision. Claws extended just enough to pierce its exoskeleton without damaging it beyond recovery. For a moment, cat and alien creature tumbled through the air together. The sleeper, designed for stealth and patience rather than combat, had no defense against this kind of direct assault. Its toxin was useless against a predator that had already committed to the attack. Pixel landed gracefully on the bridge deck, the sleeper pinned securely beneath her paws. The creature was still alive, barely, its legs twitching in futile attempts to escape. But cats were patient hunters, and Pixel had no intention of letting her prey suffer unnecessarily. A quick bite, precisely placed, severed the sleeper's main nerve cluster. The creature went still. Sarah, fighting to stay conscious, watched this entire sequence through increasingly blurred vision. She saw her small, supposedly harmless pet execute a perfect hunt against something she couldn't even properly see. Pixel had moved with the deadly efficiency of a predator that had never forgotten what it meant to kill. Good girl, Sarah managed to whisper before the toxin finally claimed her consciousness. But even as she slipped into drugged sleep, she felt Pixel curl up against her side, purring softly. The vibrations of that purr, she would later learn, actually helped counteract some of the toxin's effects, keeping her breathing steady and her heart rate stable during the crisis. Within an hour, the sleeper's toxin began to break down and disperse without its source to maintain concentration. The ship's medical systems, finally able to identify the contaminant now that it was dissipating, began to filter it from the atmosphere. Commander Zex'hai was the first to wake, his compound eyes focusing with difficulty on the scene before him. Sarah slumped in her chair, breathing but unconscious. The rest of the bridge crew in similar states, and curled up next to Sarah, a small black cat with something dark and chitinous beneath her paws. It took several minutes for his drug-addled mind to process what he was seeing. Then his mandibles began to click in what might have been amazement, or terror, or profound respect. The human's 4-kilogram companion had saved them all. When Dr. Sarah finally made it to the bridge, her medical scanners confirmed what Commander Zex'hai suspected. The creature beneath Pixel's paws was a sleeper, one of the most feared bioweapons in known space. Its presence should have meant death for every oxygen-breathing being aboard the Stellar Harmony. Instead, it had encountered something its ancient creators never anticipated. A small Earth predator with perfect hunting instincts and the reflexes to use them. As the crew slowly recovered from the toxin's effects, word spread throughout the ship about what had happened. The story grew with each telling, but the core truth remained constant. The human's tiny cat had killed a creature that could have murdered them all in their sleep. Nobody laughed about pixel size anymore. Dr. Shisera's preliminary report made for fascinating reading. Commander Zex'hai studied the data with growing amazement as his crew recovered from their brush with extinction. The creature's toxin was remarkably sophisticated, the medical officer explained to the assembled senior staff. It targeted specific neurotransmitter pathways common to most spacefaring species. The fact that it affected the human more slowly suggests some natural resistance, but even she would have succumbed within another hour. Security Chief Vel'mora, still feeling weak but alert, leaned forward. And the sleeper? You're certain of the identification? Absolutely. Dr. Shisera's serpentine head bobbed with certainty. DNA analysis confirms it's a genuine Vex'hai, a sleeper. I've only seen them in xenobiology textbooks. They were supposedly extinct. Engineer Thokgrim's rocky features settled into a frown. If they were extinct, how did one get onto our ship? Sleepers can survive in space for decades, even centuries, the doctor explained. This one was likely dormant on a piece of debris that made contact with our hull. When weakened plating finally gave way, she didn't need to finish. They all understood how close they'd come to becoming another ghost ship drifting through space. The remarkable thing, Dr. Shisera continued, is how the human's companion detected and eliminated the threat. I've run detailed scans on the creature. Pixel, Sarah interrupted softly. She was still pale from the toxin exposure but insisted on attending the briefing. Her name is Pixel. Yes, Pixel. Her sensory capabilities are extraordinary. Did you know that her auditory range extends well beyond most species aboard this ship? She can detect sounds in frequencies that our sensors can't even register. And her olfactory system. The doctor paused, consulting her notes. She has over 200 million scent receptors. For comparison, humans have about 6 million. Navigation Officer Krextel shifted his massive frame, clearly uncomfortable. Are you saying this small creature is more capable than our ship sensors? In certain ways, yes. Her reactions are also remarkable. I measured her strike against the sleeper. The precision was within millimeters, and the timing was perfect. She somehow calculated the exact trajectory needed to intercept a target she couldn't clearly see, moving through a confined space above her head. Commander Zex'hai's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Dr. Shisera, in your professional opinion, could Pixel have detected the sleeper earlier? Before it released its toxin? The medical officer's response made them all fall silent. Based on her sensory capabilities? Yes, almost certainly. She would have been aware of its presence from the moment it breached our hull. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the toxin's aftereffects. You mean, she knew? This whole time, she knew something was hunting us. It's likely. Cats are ambush predators by evolution. They're extraordinarily patient hunters who will track prey for hours or even days before striking. She may have been monitoring the sleeper's movements throughout its infiltration, waiting for the optimal moment to attack. The bridge fell silent as this revelation sank in. While they'd been going about their daily routines, joking about Sarah's tiny companion, that same companion had been conducting a deadly serious hunt against one of the galaxy's most feared bioweapons. Security Chief Vel'mora was the first to speak. Human Sarah, does your species have many such combat companions? Sarah almost laughed, remembering the mockery from just days before. We don't really think of them as combat companions. Most people keep cats because they're affectionate and comforting. The hunting thing is just instinct. Instinct, Engineer Thokgrim repeated slowly. This level of lethality is instinctual to your companion species? Well, not exactly lethality, Sarah tried to explain. Cats on Earth mostly hunt small prey, mice, birds, insects. But the instincts are the same whether they're hunting a mouse or... She gestured toward the sealed container holding the sleeper's remains. Commander Zex'hai leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the bridge lights. Human Sarah, I must ask, Are there other such creatures among your species' companions? Creatures that might appear harmless but possess similar capabilities. Sarah considered the question seriously. Dogs have incredible scent detection and loyalty. Some birds can mimic sounds perfectly and have exceptional spatial memory. Horses can sense things humans can't and react faster than we ever could. But we don't really think of them as weapons or soldiers. They're family. This concept seemed to confuse the alien crew members. Most spacefaring species had evolved beyond keeping companion animals, viewing them as inefficient uses of resources. Those species that did maintain bonds with other creatures typically chose impressive specimens, the massive, obviously dangerous creatures they described earlier. Your species bonds with creatures based on affection rather than capability? Dr. Sarah asked with scientific curiosity. Usually, yeah. Pixel isn't my companion because she's a deadly hunter. She's my companion because she purrs when she's happy and likes to sleep on my feet. Sarah reached down to stroke Pixel, who was curled contentedly in her lap, apparently unbothered by being the center of so much attention. Navigation Officer Zex'hai shook his massive head in wonder. Your species domesticated apex predators and treats them as family members? I wouldn't call Pixel an apex predator, Sarah protested. Human Sarah, Commander Zex'hai said quietly. Your companion just eliminated a bioweapon that has been the subject of military fear for millennia. She detected it when our sensors failed, tracked it when our security systems never noticed its presence, and killed it with surgical precision when the most advanced races in the galaxy would have been helpless against it. He paused, his mandibles clicking in what Sarah had learned to recognize as deep thought. If that is not an apex predator, then your species has a very different definition of the term than the rest of the galaxy. As the meeting concluded and the crew returned to their duties, Sarah remained in her chair, stroking Pixel and thinking about everything she'd learned. Her small, affectionate companion, who loved cardboard boxes and laser pointers and sleeping in sunny spots, was apparently a masterpiece of predatory evolution. What do you think, Pixel? She whispered. Are you a deadly hunter or a cuddly pet? Pixel's response was to purr and headbutt Sarah's hand affectionately, demanding more attention. But Sarah noticed something she'd never paid attention to before. Even while seeking affection, Pixel's ears were constantly moving, tracking sounds throughout the ship. Her pupils dilated and contracted as she monitored shadows and movement. Even in her most relaxed state, she was still hunting, still alert, still ready. Sarah was beginning to understand that these weren't separate aspects of Pixel's personality. They were the same thing. The affection, the playfulness, the lethal hunting precision. They were all expressions of what it meant to be a cat. And apparently, what it meant to be a cat was something the galaxy had never encountered before. 3 months later, the Stellar Harmony docked at Kepler Station, one of the largest trading posts in the Outer Rim. News of their encounter with the sleeper had spread through unofficial channels. Spacers talked, and extraordinary stories traveled faster than most cargo ships. Sarah noticed the change immediately. Where once alien species had regarded her with polite curiosity or mild amusement, now they watched her with something approaching respect. But it wasn't her they were watching. It was the small black cat perched on her shoulder. Is that? Whispered a Kethmori trader as they passed through the station's main concourse. The sleeper killer. His companion confirmed in hushed tones. Sarah sighed. The nickname had stuck despite her attempts to downplay what had happened. Pixel seemed entirely unbothered by the attention, more interested in watching the station's maintenance bots scurry along the ceiling tracks. Their first stop was the station commander's office, a routine check-in for any ship passing through Kepler Station. Commander Voss, a grizzled Veltron veteran, greeted them with barely concealed fascination. So, Voss said without preamble, this is the famous Pixel. She's just a cat, Sarah protested, though her words lacked conviction. She'd stopped believing that herself weeks ago. Just a cat that killed a sleeper. Voss leaned forward across his desk. Do you have any idea how many ships we've lost to those things over the years? Ghost vessels found drifting with entire crews dead, never knowing what hit them. He pulled up a holographic display showing shipping records. 17 confirmed sleeper kills in this sector alone over the past decade. Thousands of lives lost. And you're just a cat, eliminated one with 0 casualties. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. She was protecting her territory. It's what cats do. Her territory? Voss's laugh was more amazed than amused. She claimed an entire starship as her territory and defended it successfully. I've got military units that couldn't do that. As they completed their paperwork, Voss mentioned something that made Sarah's blood run cold. By the way, you might want to know we've had reports of increased sleeper activity in this sector. 3 more ships have gone missing in the past month, and we found another ghost vessel just last week. Commander Zex'hai's mandibles clicked with concern. Are you suggesting there's a nest of them somewhere? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Sleepers reproduce by infesting host ships, but they need a base of operations. Somewhere they can go dormant between hunts. Voss pointed to a region of space marked with warning beacons. The 7th ring asteroids. Perfect hiding spots, minimal traffic, and right in the shipping lanes. And you want us to investigate? Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Not officially, Voss replied. But if a ship happened to pass through that area, and if that ship happened to have the galaxy's only known sleeper detector aboard. He shrugged meaningfully. Sarah looked down at Pixel, who had curled up in her lap and was purring contentedly. She's not a weapon. She's my friend. The best weapons usually are, Voss said quietly. 2 days later, the stellar harmony was approaching the 7th ring asteroids. The crew's attitude toward their mission and toward Pixel had evolved considerably since their first encounter with a sleeper. Security Chief Vel'mora had installed additional monitoring equipment in Sarah's quarters, not to watch Pixel, but to learn from her. If she detects another sleeper, we need to know immediately, she'd explained. Engineer Thakrim had reinforced the ship's ventilation systems and added new filtration protocols. Your companion gave us a chance last time, he'd rumbled. I intend to make sure she has better support if there's a next time. Dr. Shisera had been studying Pixel's hunting behaviors, documenting everything from her sleep patterns to her feeding habits. She's remarkable, the doctor had concluded. Her nervous system is operating on levels we're only beginning to understand. But it was Navigation Officer Krextel who had undergone the most dramatic change. The massive Kethmori warrior, whose people prize strength and obvious power above all else, had taken to consulting Sarah about Pixel's behavior during their approach to the asteroid field.